I mean, are there specific things around, asking for funding, signing unfavorable agreements, asking for too much of a stake in your company, asking for too little, not consulting, lawyers at all? I mean, are there places you've seen people also try and cut corners?
But that's a second or third order problem.
Yeah.
I mean, that's way down the road. I mean, to put things in perspective, the percentage of companies that get venture capital financing versus those who ask for it is 1 in 400. So for every 400 companies that have gotten to a point where they actually have a product, they have something, and they're ready now to ask for VC financing, only 1 out of 400 get it. Now, angel investor is the kind of stuff we do, earlier stage, smaller dollars. It can be friends and family and folks like us. That's still 1 in 40. For every 40 companies that apply to New York Angels, 39 don't get funded. So the question of negotiating and what precise terms you do, that's a second thing. Not taking advice, however, that's a really bad one. And so good lawyers are very, very helpful.
As a corollary to this, it's like, I mean, the discussion of startups and entrepreneurialism, I actually separate the two of those. You can easily be an entrepreneur inside a corporate environment. They have a bad label, which is intrapreneur, but in the end of the day, it's a mindset. What you're doing is you're going in and you're saying, I can identify a problem which does not currently have an adequate solution. Here is my new proposed solution to that. And it just so happens that we're in the environment that we want to do that with new businesses. But of the 399 that don't get funded, a lot of those people end up in corporations, and what I would actually say to everybody is that bring that mentality with you, and when you walk into those things, you have enormous opportunities inside there as well. You can easily look at that company and say, you know what, this is an issue, we're going to do it better, here's how, and you know what, here's the plan. And you're going to have employers potentially who are going to look down and say, you know what, can you do your job? But you're also going to run into a bunch of people, because now we've had one full generation, right? I'm almost 46 years old, right? When I started the company, it was 1996. I now hire all of the people who are coming out of universities or who are, just post early stage startup, and I'm looking for entrepreneurial spirit in my company. I don't want somebody who's just going to do a job. I want somebody who's going to come in and tell me to do it better. There are people like me littered through the tech community of New York City, and we're all looking for that extra push.
Absolutely.
And I think it's key, because going back to the flexibility or going back to the options and being nimble and being opportunistic, it's like you don't have to start a 6-person or a 3-person company out of a shared workspace to be an entrepreneur. You can do it anywhere.
Having been an intrapreneur on like 3 separate occasions, I was involved in launching 5 businesses when I was at IAC. One of which with HuffPo that didn't work, called 23/6, that became a comedy news channel, and others that did work. But the thing that's a little different about that, and by the way, I fundamentally agree with your point, which is there are entrepreneurial opportunities outside of what we call, with a capital E, entrepreneurship. There is a safety net in those environments that entrepreneurs don't have. And when you don't know where the next dollar is going to come from to fund the business, and fundamentally the business needs to be deficit financed in some way, it breeds a different kind of anxiety than the one that you have making $200,000 a year at whatever. So, especially if you're a Jew from New York. So, the other thing, I may talk myself out of a job here, and I kind of do that all the time. But, I tell entrepreneurs who come to me looking for money, or, say like, so I need to raise money. I was like, well, why do you need to raise money? Well, because I need to do this idea. Well, I was like, have you tried to do this idea without raising money? Well, no, but I was like, if you can build this company without taking any outside capital, then you're better off for it. The best businesses are the businesses where you can maintain total control over them. And so like this whole idea of raising money and raising venture capital, it's all sexy and cool and whatever. You only raise money, and I tell this to every entrepreneur I meet with, because you have to. And you only raise money from venture capitalists because they're the right investors for the kind of thing you want to do. Otherwise, there may be other sources of capital, or better yet, you may not need anybody's capital. And actually, we've spent a lot of time looking at platforms and investing in platforms lately that provide alternative means of financing to companies where they don't have to give up equity in a business to necessarily build any kind of successful business. So just to bring it back around to that point,
So for example, like what?
So for example, Kickstarter is a great example. Kickstarter is a platform that allows folks that want to really it really starts and ends with creative projects, or at least that's what they want it, that's where they want it to end, to take money from sponsors who may get something in return for that, but they're not getting equity in the business. There are other, I was on Bloomberg the other day with a guy who started a company called Circle Up, which is trying to help companies raise, different kinds of local businesses raise money from their local community. I saw a model the other day, a company in Brooklyn called C.me, a very creative a platform for creatives where they're trying to recreate the patronage model, where when you give somebody a couple bucks on a subway for playing something great or whatever, and they're not looking for equity in response to that. And also certain types of bank financing, certain types of receivables financing, certain types of working capital financing. I'm sure the city has programs that can help with this. Like, there's lots of interesting and creative things out there where you have to pay a return on that capital, but you may not have to give away ownership of your business. And this is sort of sacrilegious as a venture capitalist saying this, but I believe in it to my core, that there are lots of different ways to build successful businesses. And before you go down the path of like, how do I raise money from VC or whatever, think about what you're doing, what you want to do, and what you really need to make that happen.
And I just wanted to follow up on what Mo was saying. I think it's absolutely correct. We meet constantly with startups to find out, first, let's make sure the city is not getting in the way of any of these startups growing, and ideally, how do we support them further? What are the biggest needs, and is there a way that as the city of New York, with all the resources that we have, that we can support those? And the concept, going back to this concept of don't go for money unless you absolutely need to, since I believe there are a lot of students here, that is a great time to either use the opportunity that you're in school to learn some of the skills that you then would not have to pay for externally, like coding, like the ability to build your product, at least get to a prototype so that you can prove the model and then do some of that fundraising. This is one of the reasons why the city has been investing a lot in higher education and getting even more world-class institutions that will teach engineering in New York City, like the Cornell Tech School, NYU Poly nearby, the CUSP School, and Columbia is also expanding that too. And if you are, you're not going to learn coding, you're not going to learn the technical side of things, then look for a co-founder. Reach out to the computer science department at your college and find someone there, because that's something that we're seeing. We have an intern right now in our office. He's a senior at NYU. He's been with us a couple of months. He's like, oh, I dropped this politics class. I'm taking a CS course instead because it's a great opportunity, and you won't have it later on too. So I think that's a nice thing to focus on. And to just mention, the city does provide some funding opportunities. So one is the New York City Investment Fund, which is a partnership of EDC and the Economic Development Corporation and the Partnership for New York City. But also throughout the year, there's all these kinds of smaller amounts of money, $10,000 up to $50,000, the NYC Big Apps competition. So smaller initiatives that can get you enough funding to sort of get to that next level.
To put things in perspective, there are over 600,000 companies that are started every year in the U.S., and roughly 1,000 get venture capital financing. So so when you think about starting a company, just forget venture capital. You probably should forget angel financing. You should just go out and start the thing on your own. Do it without money, without investment. Do it with a co-founder. If you are working at a company, figure out how you can be entrepreneurial. Because the interesting thing that is happening in our society right now is that companies are shrinking, and they are shrinking at an amazing rate. If you can think about it now, Google today, worldwide, has fewer people than were employed in one Ford Motor Company manufacturing plant in 1928. So if you think about what's happening to big companies, they're disappearing. We are heading rapidly to a world in which entrepreneurs are going to rule, because you're either going to be an entrepreneur yourself who is starting a company with very little cash, your own cash or no cash or angel cash, and you're picking up your customers from all over the world through a connected, globalized society. You're picking up your suppliers, you're picking up your coding teams from all over the world, or you're going to be a personal producer doing something else, but you are going to be entrepreneurial about it, about finding your next gig, whether it's a creative gig or a coding gig or anything else. So we are all here in support of entrepreneurship, and that's where you should be heading.